So we are nearly 7,000 years before the pyramids, which are the first monumental building everyone knows.
History often surprises us with discoveries that change everything we thought we knew. One such surprise came from a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt. He was not just another researcher, but the man who revealed Göbekli Tepe to the world, a site that many now call the world's first temple. Long before the pyramids of Egypt or the great stone circles of Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe stood as proof that humans could organize, build, and carve with purpose. But there was more to Schmidt's story. Behind the glory of Göbekli Tepe was another site, Göbekli, which he quietly studied and thought about for many years. Unlike the monumental stone circles of Göbekli Tepe, Göbekli seemed ordinary on the surface, hidden under the growing city of Şanlıurfa in Turkey. Yet, for Schmidt, it carried a truth even bigger than the stones on the hill. As he approached the last days of his life, he finally admitted what he believed Göbekli meant for the story of human history. His admission was not shouted in conferences or written in books, but spoken quietly to close colleagues. It was his final secret, one that would only be fully understood after his death. To understand why this was so important, we first need to look at what Göbekli Tepe revealed, why it shocked the world, and how Göbekli completed the missing piece in the puzzle of civilization. In 1994, Klaus Schmidt visited a hilltop near the city of Şanlıurfa in southeastern Turkey. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than an ordinary mound. Farmers had even cleared stones from the area, thinking it was just rough land. But Schmidt noticed something strange: huge pieces of limestone sticking out of the ground. As he looked closer, he realized they were shaped like giant T-pillars, many still buried. Some were more than 5 meters tall and carefully arranged in circles. What made them even more special were the carvings. Animals like snakes, foxes, scorpions, and birds decorated the stones. These were not rough scratches. They were detailed, symbolic, and full of meaning. As excavations continued, Schmidt and his team uncovered layer after layer of structures, all dating back to around 9600 BCE. This shocked historians. At that time, people were believed to be simple hunter-gatherers, moving from place to place, with no permanent homes or complex structures. Yet Göbekli Tepe proved they were capable of large projects requiring planning, cooperation, and vision. The idea that people might have come together for religion or shared beliefs before farming was groundbreaking. Maybe agriculture did not come first, maybe belief, rituals, and gathering around sacred sites came before planting crops. This turned the old story of civilization upside down. Suddenly, Göbekli Tepe was called the world's first temple, and Schmidt became famous. While the world celebrated Göbekli Tepe, Schmidt quietly turned his attention to another site just 2 miles away. This place was called Göbekli, and unlike the grand hilltop, it was mostly hidden under the modern city of Şanlıurfa. From the outside, nothing special could be seen. There were no giant pillars, no animal carvings, and no breathtaking stone circles. Instead, there were 8 low mounds, almost invisible to ordinary passers-by. But Schmidt believed it held something important. In 1995, he began small test digs there, opening trenches in 4 of the mounds. What he and his team found was very different from Göbekli Tepe. Instead of monumental pillars, they uncovered stone foundations of houses, mud walls, and hearths used for cooking and warmth. There were no symbols of gods or massive enclosures. What they found were homes, places where families lived, cooked, worked, and raised children. It felt human, ordinary, and domestic. At first, this site received little attention. Most of the public and even many archaeologists were still focused on the mystery of Göbekli Tepe. Yet Schmidt kept thinking about Göbekli Tepe. For him, it represented something just as important as the first temple. If Göbekli Tepe showed the spiritual side of early humans, Göbekli Tepe showed the practical side: everyday life, community, and the birth of settled living. Excavations at Göbekli Tepe revealed thick layers of history, some measuring over 6 meters deep. These layers were like a timeline of human life, stretching across thousands of years. At the bottom, researchers found remains from the same period as early Göbekli Tepe. Above that, There were signs of early farming and pottery. Near the top, traces from the Hellenistic and Roman times appeared. This meant the site had been used again and again, rebuilt and lived in by many generations. Among the discoveries were stone tools, beads, bracelets, pigment palettes, and small figurines carved from limestone. Some of these figurines showed men, others women, and some were genderless. Many of the female figures had large, exaggerated features, which may have symbolized fertility or abundance. Animal bones revealed diets based on sheep, goats, pigs, and sometimes deer. All of this painted a picture of people living settled lives with families, food storage, and traditions. Unlike Göbekli Tepe's mystery, Göbekli told a story of stability and everyday survival. To Schmidt, this was the missing piece. Civilization, he believed, was not just about monuments and rituals. It was about how people turned ritual societies into communities that could last for many years. Scholars believed Göbekli Tepe and Göbekli were used at the same time, serving different purposes, one for rituals and one for living. But Schmidt began to think differently. He noticed that the tools, pottery, and structures at Göbekli seemed to come from a later time than Göbekli Tepe's great stone circles. This led him to a bold idea. Maybe Göbekli came after Göbekli Tepe, not alongside it. If this was true, it changed the meaning of both sites. Göbekli Tepe would not be the beginning of settled life, but the high point of ritual society. Göbekli would then represent what happened after, the move from grand ceremonies to small, family-centered communities. In Schmidt's view, the people who once gathered at the Great Temple eventually shifted toward farming, homes, and practical living. Religion did not disappear, but it became more personal, woven into daily routines instead of giant public gatherings. This was the truth Schmidt carried for years but hesitated to share widely. He knew it challenged the grand image of Göbekli Tepe that had made him famous. But, in his last days, he finally admitted it to close colleagues. He said Göbekli was not just another site. It was the real beginning of how settled human life continued after the age of monuments. On July 20, 2014, while on vacation in Germany, Klaus Schmidt died suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 61. The archaeological world was shocked. Most tributes remembered him as the man who uncovered Göbekli Tepe, the great temple of the ancient world. Few mentioned Göbekli, and fewer still understood the importance Schmidt had quietly attached to it. Yet, 7 years later, in 2021 and 2022, new excavations at Göbekli began to confirm his final theory. A joint Turkish-German team uncovered rectangular houses, workshops, and tools that clearly belonged to a later period than Göbekli Tepe. Radiocarbon dating showed that Göbekli was mainly occupied after the Great Temple was no longer used. People had not disappeared after Göbekli Tepe. They had simply changed. They built homes instead of temples. They shifted from rituals of stone to rituals of daily life. Figurines, beads, and household items showed that spiritual meaning still existed. But it had moved inside the family rather than towering over society in monumental form. This evidence echoed Schmidt's words. Göbekli was the missing piece, the bridge between the world of great rituals and the world of settled communities. Today, Klaus Schmidt is remembered mostly for bringing Göbekli Tepe to light, but slowly, his vision of Göbekli is gaining attention. Museums in Canliofa now display artifacts from the site. Young archaeologists study his old notes, searching for clues he left behind. To them, Göbekli is not just a smaller site under a modern city. It is a key to understanding how human civilization truly developed. Göbekli Tepe showed what humans could build together in ritual and belief. Göbekli showed how humans adapted, survived, and built daily life. Both were necessary for civilization to grow. Without rituals, people might never have gathered. Without daily life and farming, people might never have stayed. Schmidt's legacy, then, is not just about a temple on a hill. It is about the full journey of humanity from sacred monuments to ordinary homes, from collective ceremonies to family kitchens. The danger today is that much of Göbekli is being lost under urban development. Roads, houses, and buildings continue to cover the ancient mounds. If it disappears completely, we may lose the clearest window into how humanity made this shift. That is why scholars now stress the importance of protecting it. Schmidt once said, "It was the missing piece, and now the world finally understands why." One of the most fascinating parts of Göbekli Tepe is the carvings on the stone pillars. Each image, snakes, foxes, vultures, scorpions, and wild boars, was not placed randomly. They carried meaning for the people of that time. But what did they mean? Archaeologists still debate this. Some believe the animals were linked to the stars, part of an early system of astronomy. Others think they represented spiritual guardians, protecting the sacred circle. Still others suggest they symbolized the cycle of life and death, with vultures perhaps representing the journey of the soul. What makes this so powerful is that these carvings were made 11,000 years ago, long before writing was invented. They are messages from the deep past, carved in stone, waiting for us to decode them. For Schmidt, these images showed that Göbekli Tepe was not just a gathering place, but a center of shared meaning. People from miles away may have traveled to see these stones, to take part in rituals, and to feel part of something greater than themselves. But when compared with Göbekli Tepe, the difference becomes clear. While Göbekli Tepe told a story in stone, Göbekli Tepe told a story in daily actions: cooking, crafting, and farming. This contrast between symbols of the sacred and symbols of the ordinary was at the heart of Schmidt's thinking. Civilization, he believed, was built on both. Imagine living in Göbekli Tepe around 8000 BCE, instead of massive temples. You would wake up in a rectangular house made of mud brick and stone. The floor might be plastered smooth, and in the center, there would be a small hearth where fire burned for warmth and cooking. The family would begin the day by tending to sheep or goats, which provided milk, wool, and meat. Others would prepare food, grinding grains on stone querns, or drying meat and fruit for storage. Children played outside, learning skills by copying adults. Tools such as stone sickles, bone needles, and flint knives were common. The community worked together, sharing tasks and trading goods with nearby settlements. Unlike Göbekli Tepe, where people might gather seasonally for rituals, Göbekli Tepe was about permanence. The rhythm of life followed the seasons: planting in spring, harvesting in summer, storing food for winter. Yet even in this ordinary life, traces of belief remained. Figurines of women with large features, small stone amulets, and pigment palettes suggest rituals tied to fertility, protection, and identity. People may not have built giant stone circles anymore, but they still carried spiritual meaning into their homes. This everyday spirituality is what Schmidt believed was the true continuation of human culture. The extraordinary temple gave birth to the ordinary house, and together they formed the path of civilization. Not all archaeologists agreed with Schmidt's interpretation. Some believed Göbekli Tepe was simply a settlement that coexisted with Göbekli Tepe, not something that came after it. Others argued that his theory of ritual leading to farming was too bold. They felt that agriculture must have developed first, since without food stability, people could not build large temples. Schmidt countered by pointing to the evidence. Göbekli Tepe was built before widespread farming in the region. This meant people had already organized themselves for ritual before they had stable food production. Later, Göbekli Tepe showed the gradual shift to farming and permanent homes. After Schmidt's death, new studies began to support his view. Radiocarbon dates and pottery fragments